The American-Vietnam War, spanning from 1954 to 1975, pitted the Socialist Democratic Republic of Vietnam, also known as the DRV, in the north, and their allies against the Republic of Vietnam in the south and their U.S. allies. The war ended with the DRV taking control of all of Vietnam and implementing a communist government. In the aftermath, soldiers of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or ARVN, fled when they could to the U.S. and other countries. Some remained in Vietnam under the communist government they had previously fought against. Because these veterans were neither a part of the winning DRV military or of the U.S. Armed Forces, they do not receive veteran status in Vietnam or in the United States and are thus not eligible for service-related government benefits. In contrast, people who fought for the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north, or the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, won the war and enjoy awards and benefits from their government in Vietnam for their military service. In the United States, veterans of the American-Vietnam War were often looked down on by the general public, but were still recognized by the U.S. government and received veteran benefits despite public opinion. Our research is focused on the treatment of war trauma for these four veteran groups: ARVN veterans in the United States, ARVN veterans in Vietnam, former DRV military and NLF in Vietnam, and U.S. veterans in the United States. Our research explores what types of mental health services are available to these veterans, how accessible the care is, and whether veterans utilize these services. We chose to focus on mental health treatment for these veteran groups because the mental health needs of these veterans have not been adequately met or researched, particularly in the Vietnamese context. We hope to use what we have learned to identify the gaps and inequities in mental health care for these veterans. In Vietnamese culture, mental health is heavily stigmatized and misunderstood, and mental illness is often considered to be a sign of weakness or punishment. Additionally, people who exhibit abnormal behaviors due to mental illness are seen as crazy, not ill.
Because growing up in that era, mental illness is partly considered and strongly considered as a weakness. And so forth. If your mind is weak, that's why you can't manage it. And especially for a Vietnamese man, the societal role being a provider, being someone, the protector, the one who leads and governs, and for them to be labeled as weak-minded, it's a big shame. And then the other aspect, the cultural, the history, the religious aspect of it is part of the stigma also stems from the misconception or the taboo that mental illness is a consequences. It's a consequence of the bad things that you or your family or your ancestors have done in the past life, and that now you have to live with that consequence. That's karma. And so when someone is seen as having a mental illness, it's like a scarlet letter saying that you or someone in your family ancestor has done something bad in life, and so they kind of get outcast. And so because of that, they don't want to be seen. And then lastly, in the Vietnamese community, oftentimes when the term mental illness is referred to, they all accumulate to one diagnosis. well, oftentimes they look at that as schizophrenia, or they use the terms crazy. And so it doesn't matter what it is, if it's term mental illness or psychology is brought up, they only think of the term crazy.
Mà cái chính là do cái tâm lý của người Việt Nam rất ngại ngùng, rất e ngại, rất sợ hãi cái chuyện là chẩn đoán người thân của mình là có vấn đề về sức khỏe tâm thần. Ngay đầu tiên thì đa số là không tìm đến bác sĩ chuyên khoa tâm thần, mà người ta đi tìm các bác sĩ chuyên khoa khác. Người bệnh tâm thần thì người ta cho rằng người ta chả có bệnh, bản thân người ta phủ định bệnh tật, cho nên người ta bảo tôi chẳng cần khám, tôi chẳng cần bác sĩ. Mà vì chính cái lý do đó cho nên là có khi là gia đình người thân cũng bảo là biết là anh này, ông bà này không bình thường, nhưng mà người ta không chịu đi khám nên là người ta cũng chấp nhận. Đây là cũng có cái quan niệm là ví dụ như là bây giờ nó đang bình thường như thế, bình thường tương đối thôi, với lại cho vào cái khoa tâm thần giống như người ta là cho đi một cái cảm giác như là người ta cho rằng đấy là đi đưa vào một cái chỗ để tra tấn, để tù đày gì đấy, chứ không phải là đi khám bệnh chữa bệnh.
This stigmatization and lack of knowledge about mental illness is largely due to cultural differences between Vietnamese society and psychology, which is based on Western ideals and cannot be effectively adapted to other cultures. Psychology terms accepted in the West do not exist in the Vietnamese language, and their societal views on health and mental illness prevent Western diagnoses from being accurate.
I was working on an article like how these trauma languages and theories that we use that are very biomedical model, Western biomedical models, that how it really fails to capture capture the complexity of the experience that Asian American communities or other minoritized community experience, right? What do veterans say about mental health, right? Like, do they call them mental health, or do they just say, I don't know, headache or bad memories?
Psychology only works if you stay and work in the US, in the Western world. Psychology is useless outside of that, because, and this is coming from a white man. Psychology is not adaptive for a missionary to take to Asia or other parts of the world, because it's founded from a Western perspective, and the modality doesn't align. And
ARVN veterans in Vietnam are discriminated against by the Vietnamese government and general public. They are often thought to have fought for the wrong side of the war and are judged for their past loyalties. This discrimination can affect veterans' everyday life and can prevent them from accessing government resources and other support systems.
Những người trong chiến tranh sau này hòa bình, người ta có cái ác cảm với cái này, người ta có ác cảm, tự nhiên người ta không dám gặp, không dám tiếp xúc vậy mà nói chuyện người ta. Ví dụ một anh thương thương binh bây giờ mà người lạ đến hỏi chuyện thì đã không mấy rồi, ngoại trừ là những mạnh thường quân. Bố chú Cải ở là cái vùng ven, còn những cái vùng ven này là cái vùng xa thành phố, sợ nói ra những cái gì đó rồi ở đó người ta bắt bẻ, này kia, căm ghét này kia.
Đánh tôi là em tôi là cha cái thằng ngãi đó, đánh cái em tôi ra chặn đường chạy xuống hai quỹ ban công an đó, đứng cầm cái bánh kêu xuống quát xuống rồi em tôi chạy xuống công an đứng tùm lum, đâu có nói gì đâu, em tôi chạy vô tập quấn em được cầm bánh quấn cây tét cái đầu, máu đầu quá rồi mấy kêu bỏ, không có bắt gì hết. Rồi bà giữ được quấn toàn chết luôn.
U.S., stigmatization also exists among the American veteran population. However, much of this stigmatization may have more to do with military culture than American culture.
Veterans in the military were trained to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and we're basically taught to suck it up and drive on. So we come home saying we're okay even when we're injured. We don't ask for help even though when it's really bad. We literally have to fall apart into an unfunctional mess before we reach out for help. And a lot of veterans feel very isolated and alone because we don't share our PTSD, because it can come up as weakness. Veterans in the military were trained to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and we're basically taught to suck it up and drive on. So we come home saying we're okay even when we're injured. We don't ask for help even though when it's really bad. We literally have to fall apart into an unfunctional mess before we reach out for help. And a lot of veterans feel very isolated and alone because we don't share our PTSD because it can come up as weakness.
In addition, U.S. veterans of the American-Vietnam War often distrust the U.S. government, which can prevent them from seeking help from the government-run Veterans Association, or VA.
Well, the VA is open and available, so the main barrier is their own, distrust of the government, people who were drafted and then sent over there and then came home and called names because they, answered the call or they had to. So that's kind of their own heads getting over the fear of the government. But they have like the vet center and other places now in my organization. But of course, we don't get the funding from the government. So
Right.
There's a lot of non-governmental places, but they're all underfunded, and there's no like one catalog that connects them all. There's no, we're all these independent little organizations. So their own inability to ask for help.
This matches with a poll conducted in 1985 by the Washington Post and NBC, which found that 57% of the veterans surveyed were more distrustful of the government because of the American-Vietnam War, and that, quote, cynicism was even higher for veterans who saw heavy combat, end quote. For ARVN veterans, a significant barrier to receiving care is the lack of recognition as veterans by both the Vietnamese and U.S. governments. This means that ARVN veterans do not receive benefits from their governments for their military service and cannot access the VA in the U.S. or the Vietnamese Veterans Association, or VVA, in Vietnam. They are still able to access other government aid, like Medicare in the U.S., which has helped some ARVN veterans ease the financial burden but does not compensate them for their military service.
With a lot of seniors, I do a lot of community organizing events in the community. And so that deals a lot with the Vietnamese seniors, and most of them are war veterans. And it pains me to see what they're going through and suffering, and they get no help because they don't receive the benefit from the VA. Many of them, some of them, they have Medicare. Before that, they don't have health insurance. And so before the Affordable Care Act passed, a lot of those individuals have no insurance. And so they would have to deal with their medical or physical or mental illness alone.
In the United States, ARVN veterans face another challenge: a lack of mental health information, materials, resources, and professionals available in the Vietnamese language.
And one is language issues, that a lot of mental health services or even ideas or access to facilities and services, those are not often spoken or communicated in the native language of these Asian immigrants, especially first gens, and I think I would imagine many of the veterans tend to be first gens, right? So yeah, I think just the cultural challenges, and I think language and culture plays a lot of role in like making it difficult for these veterans and any Asian immigrants to know about mental health issues or learn about them, and makes it very, so I think language is one. And
so the infrastructure is also not there to help support, because when I was in Chicago, I was the only Vietnamese speaking clinician in the whole state.
In Vietnam, there's little support and funding given to mental health and mental health research. This lack of funding and resources can make mental health treatment difficult to access and can lead to poorer quality of care. The lack of governmental support and resources likely perpetuates stigmas about mental illness in Vietnam. And why psychiatric hospitals exist in Vietnam, they have a history of harsh conditions and abuse of their patients, causing people to be wary of professional and inpatient treatment.
Các cái buồng giống như các cái salim ấy, cái cánh cửa thì rất là chắc chắn, nó có những cái ô nhỏ như thế này này để đưa thuốc, đưa các thứ qua cái ô đấy. Bệnh nhân ở trong kia nó bức bối, nó la hét, nó đập phá, giống như là ở trong salim. Khi mà mở cửa ra thì rất dễ là nhân viên rất dễ bị tấn công. khoảng 70 60 mấy đấy, thì là giáo sư Lê Hải Chi đi học ở Đức về, thì ông mang cái mô hình cửa mở open doors system, hệ thống cửa mở, nhưng mà không phải là mở bung như là ông Philippines, mà người ta có thêm control, tức là cửa mở có quản lý, bệnh nhân được tự do đi lại trong cái khuôn viên của cái khoa rộng lớn, trong ấy có các cái cơ sở để vui chơi, ví dụ như có sân bóng chuyền, có bàn tennis, rồi là có thể đánh cờ, rồi là có các cái nhạc cụ để có thể chơi đàn, chơi nhạc, hát hò gì đấy, rồi là dệt chiếu, rồi là may vá quần áo, rồi thậm chí là nặn tượng, làm các cái đồ gốm, vân vân và vân vân, rồi là trồng hoa, rồi tập thể dục, gọi là hệ thống cửa mở có quản lý. Và trong ấy thì mở bung hết tất cả các cái cửa, không có cái cửa buồng nào có khóa.
American veterans also face structural barriers in accessing mental health care. Long wait times for treatment and claim processing at the VA can deter veterans from seeking help. A study conducted by Feynman, Asphalt, and Griffith regarding wait times for U.S. military veterans found that the average wait time for a mental health appointment was 44 days through a VA community partner and 34 days through the VA. These wait times are in addition to the time it takes for the VA to process a veteran's claim, which the VA reported to be 118.3 days on average in March of 2023. This means that the average U.S. veteran is waiting 5 months to receive care.
With all of these barriers, how do these veterans access the support and care they need? While conducting our interviews, a common theme emerged. All 4 veteran groups utilized the ties they had to the people around them and to their fellow veterans. According to those we interviewed, this social connectedness is vital to their mental well-being. In Vietnam, many of the veterans we talked with cited family and friends as their primary mode of support. One ARVN veteran, Ha Long, stated it is only because of his wife he could overcome his struggles, and another veteran has shared their feelings about those closest to him.
Có chứ. Cái đối mặt với nó tức là cái đầu tiên là cái tình cảm trong gia đình. Biết chia sẻ, biết chăm sóc lẫn nhau. Và biết cái lúc nào đó cần phải nhẹ nhàng. Đừng đẩy cái đó bị ức chế. Thế còn với bè bạn thì chịu khó đến chăm nhau, tâm sự với nhau, chia sẻ về cách nhìn xã hội trong giai đoạn mới và cách dạy dỗ, giáo dục con cái.
For former DRV military and NLF veterans, the VVA in Vietnam provides a way to connect with other veterans and find social support. The VVA organizes battlefield visits for the veterans to honor their fallen comrades. ARVN veterans in Vietnam are not able to participate in the VVA. However, they still rely on veteran connections with each other, but some of these connections come from ARVN veterans living overseas. They may also receive financial support from ARVN veterans and family living overseas, or from U.S.-based organizations dedicated to supporting ARVN veterans in Vietnam.
Vô hội phụ lão, đấy, rồi mỗi tháng lãnh hội phụ lão được mấy trăm. Cái anh ở bên Mỹ á, tên là Đào Vĩnh Ký, là anh liên hệ bển mỗi năm cũng gửi tiền cho vô đó.
For ARVN veterans in the United States, especially those living in areas with a large Vietnamese population, participating in and getting support from their surrounding community is central to the veterans' well-being. Additionally, ARVN veterans in these areas are able to maintain connections with fellow ARVN veterans. Among the veterans, word-of-mouth referrals can be a powerful tool to encourage seeking mental health treatment. Paul Hoang, a Vietnamese refugee, social worker, and community leader in Orange County, California, describes the importance of word-of-mouth referrals among these veterans at his own psychological institute.
And then because of that, they start spreading the news. They become their own champion for the community, and they start recommending it to other friends. Hey, I've seen Paul. He was really helpful. This is what I was before. Now this is where I am today. Right? I want you to be able to get better as well. Just go talk to Paul, for example. So that's why we don't even advertise anymore. All of our referrals through word of mouth.
ARVN veterans in the United States also utilize religion as a form of social connectedness and support. Churches can be a safe space for them to connect with their fellow countrymen, and church leaders can provide support and guidance to struggling veterans.
Third, place of respectability, meaning it's where it's where Vietnamese people, immigrants, can come to their Catholic churches and eat their food and talk to one another in Vietnam. They don't have to worry about their English or accent. It's where they can worship God in their languages, right? In their expressions, right? So those are kind of socio-cultural functions of religion, right? Which I think, that whether it's Buddhist temples or Catholic shrines, it gives them a space where they can at least be who they are, and it gives them a sense of safety. It's where they can eat food, their own food, and also raise their children, and also hopefully pass down their faith if they want to. And
yes, because it's in the informal setting that the person who refused to go to the VA for 30 years meets the guy or girl who just started going to the VA after 30 years and says, hey, it's not that bad, it's changed. And it's in those informal settings that they get to hear other veterans, who aren't selling anything, say, yeah, I found a lot of relief from this therapy at the VA, or this person is good, or this program is good.
Social connectedness is not the only support system these veterans depend on. Our interviewees told us about the importance of having a hobby or participating in their communities and creating meaning in their lives.
And so because of their ability to focus on doing something that's meaningful for them, it helps them to bring meaning and purpose in their life. And so it doesn't matter what illness we have. The research have shown that when we are able to engage in activities that bring us meaning and purpose, it's a great protective factor to help us to heal as well as to prevent development of mental illness. And so my dad, for example, and others, they have been part of a certain religious, ministry group that have been serving the community for many years. And so there's a lot of pockets, a lot of activities similarly where the seniors are involved in that. And through that camaraderie of support, they kind of establish their own support group. And they channel their focus and they channel their energy in doing good work. And in doing so, their focus is no longer on the illness that they have. The challenge with those model or those environment is that they haven't processed their trauma or their thoughts intellectually or psychologically, so that when they are alone, when they are not engaged in this group setting and they are alone, their thoughts come back to them, right? Their nightmares or their flashback comes back, or any triggers, and they still suffer alone in silence. And they do get a respite when they do. So that's another reason why people become so active in the community, because they want to be active so they can avoid thinking about the past, avoid dealing with those symptoms.
A lot of these veterans were able to stay busy with work and never had to think about it. And now that they're done working, all of a sudden, because that stuff you carry doesn't go anywhere. You can hide it for a while, but it comes back to you. So a lot of them can't wait to go down to the river and start fishing after they retire, and they get down there and it's just the war. And they realize they've just been distracting by being in alcohol. So giving them hands-on things to do. Gardening with veterans is a big one that helps. Guitars for veterans, just all that stuff.
Our fire outside bosom swell at remembrance of the story